is an important element.
It's sort of like a positive feedback loop. I mean, as you were saying, Andrew, like we needed this technology to move there, but then that influenced how we taught, and it just sort of evolved naturally from all of those different inputs.
Good morning, Andrew, Douglas, and Carl.
Hello,
Carl's here.
I'm here. I think this is my first podcast.
You're like the wizard behind the curtain or something like that. Was there a curtain in The Wizard of Oz?
Yes, there was. That's right.
Think of the green curtain.
So Carl, hang on a sec, Andrew. Are you saying Carl's the man behind the curtain to whom we should pay no attention?
Possibly.
Are you just the projection of the fake scary wizard that's out front, and Carl's actually running all the machinery that's making the fire blast and stuff?
It could be.
Definitely me running some of the mechanics back there, sure. Keeping things oiled.
So has this been, so let's see. I'm thinking to some of the oldest Piper's Dojo videos that I remember watching, like the one where here's how Carl ties his bag in is one that comes to mind, right? Like back when the video format was still a square and not widescreen yet, because that's the shape my monitor was too. Has that always been like the dynamic? Like, well, Carl, you take care of some of that back end stuff and maybe hop in to do a video now and again. Or have your roles within the dojo changed over time?
They've definitely changed over time, but I'm very interested in doing a lot of the technical stuff, maintenance, and the hands-on stuff. That's very much my wheelhouse. I enjoy doing that sort of stuff. So whether it was building shelves at our old office or tying in bags, I was happy to do that. And I think, Andrew, you were happy to let me do that and lean on that element of organization and keeping things running.
For sure.
Was it in Oran Moore that you guys met, or had you met before then?
Yeah. Carl played in Oran Moore. Yeah.
I was introduced by a friend, and Andrew was just sort of taking over the reins of Oran Moore at the time.
How much of a headhunter experience was that, Andrew? Were you immediately, that one right there, I'm going to make that guy do work?
Well, if I'm remembering correctly, my very first year of Oran Moore, Carl was not in. I feel like it was slightly scandalous, and I was super annoyed because Carl was a really good piper. But I think you were busy doing other things the first year. But then the second year, I think you showed up.
Yeah, so I played 1 year with Donald as pipe major, and you were sort of transitioning. Then I had months off before I did other things. And then, and then I was in 2009.
2009.
Andrew, did you feel a little bit like, oh, I take over and some of the strongest players immediately leave? What's going on there?
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose that's the reality of the situation when anybody takes over any band, especially in North America. And I wouldn't say it was, I don't know if it was taking over. I don't know. I think that's a word, that's a turn of phrase people use. I'm not sure that's really what it is. But you think when you become pipe major of a band, everyone's going to be like, by the way, you think the same thing when you start a business as well. You're like, oh, well, I'm great. And everyone's going to also agree that I'm great. And there's going to be a line out the door to join the band now that I'm doing it. And that's not what it is at all. And so then you have to do what everybody else has to do and just do your best. And
put in the hours.
Managing that, it's a really difficult thing. I don't miss it. I don't miss it one bit. But yeah, that's where Carl and I got to know each other a little bit.
More and more, huh?
Yeah. And then I think that already my process of starting the dojo had already begun, right? So my journey is sort of like I moved back to the New York area, and I moved to the capital region of New York kind of because Oran Moore was there and it was a project that I wanted to work on. But I had a crappy customer service job for about 6 months, and that would have been very late 2007 into the middle of 2008. But for me, the process sort of began like, okay, if I could just teach on average 2 lessons 5 days a week, I would make more than I make at this crappy job. And I already had 6 students or something I was doing anyways. So it was like, okay, so I ditched the job and I started teaching bagpipes. I picked up a couple of workshops that I could teach on occasional weekends. And I was making ends meet. And then, I don't know, at some point, not too long after, Donald Lindsay and I started the in-person Piper's Dojo in the Albany area. I don't know, Carl, you must have come by there once or twice.
Oh, yeah. Are you kidding? I mean, I would drive up I was living and going to university downstate in New York, just above the city. I would drive up some Thursdays to drive 3 hours and have 2 hours of workshops and then practice and then
Then we
go
had band
home.
practice after. Yeah. Yeah, that was cool. So that was like the original idea
was
of the
cool.
dojo.
But yeah, the original idea was cool. Where the name comes from, like getting together in a group, working individually sometimes in front of that group, you learn collectively. And that is true to this day at the dojo, but
Yeah.
it's root in person.
Yeah. And in the very beginning, it was Donald, Lindsay, and I doing it. And it was kind of cool. And it started really strong, and then it kind of tapered off. I think that's something that happens a lot in the bagpipe world is something new and awesome comes out and everybody buys one. And then after everyone's tried it, then it kind of tapers off. But one of the things that happened as we were doing the dojo, if I'm remembering correctly, is people needed supplies for stuff. And so I just very sort of casually started looking into how I might get supplies for people, like reeds and drone reeds. And occasionally someone would show up and they would need a set of pipes. And I set up relationships with different vendors and makers and stuff like that. And we started selling supplies, sort of primarily to just help our Pipers Dojo in-person people. And then it wasn't long for me to sort of discover, which in those days was far more rare. Now anyone can set up a Shopify store that can do 20 times the amount of things, 20 times as easily as what we could do back then. I remember it was, maybe I don't remember. What was the name of that company? Net something, or man, it's slipping. It's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, I figured out how to set up a primitive e-commerce website. And then I started selling some bagpipe supplies online. And this was all before Carl joined me. But anyway, we'll just fast forward. At a certain point, I decided to kind of get serious, and I drew up a business plan, and I took on Carl as a partner in the business and also several investors that joined us to give us enough money to start up the business legit, which was originally just kind of like an e-commerce plan.
Yeah.
It was mostly on just selling bagpipe supplies.
Oh, that was like the main thing, huh?
Yeah. Like, I
It
mean,
was
Dojo
fascinating.
University was in the business plan,
Mm-hmm.
but only in very primitive form. We're like, okay, yeah. And plus we're going to start this cool thing where we teach people bagpipes on the internet. But that was about it. And we were mainly focused on trying to make money in the bagpipe e-commerce. And we had a local shop as well. But anyway, that's when Carl came on board.
Yeah, I was brought on to kind of spearhead the logistics of the e-commerce and free up some of Andrew's time to be able to work on other projects, AKA the online learning. So yeah, he called me, I don't know, like a couple of weeks before graduation. He's like, dude, we got to do this. We're going to start a business. I need you. That's that. I mean, that was, 2011. In May, I think, mid-May that I moved up to Schenectady.
Yeah.
So then, Carl, you were like participating in the in-person dojo for a couple years at that point.
Yeah, on and
and
off.
off.
I was mostly
Yeah.
playing in a band, which meant occasionally I'd spend one evening at the in-person dojo. But
That's what was so cool about the old dojo was that like when Carl was in town, he would just pop by and he would be able to get, I would listen to him. Donald would listen to him. If anybody else was there, they'd get a chance to hear him and we could just get the pipes going. And then we would merge that into our Thursday night or and more practice back in the day as well. But it was kind of neat. We had a lot of members that would be there 2 or 3 times a week, but Carl, a couple times a month maybe or something.
But you
and have it too.
always as a student or as a learner, right? Or had you started
absolutely.
helping teach too?
no, I wasn't teaching at that time. It was just, I was teaching in other aspects of my life, but no, for that, it was just improving my band game. I came to Oranmore as a beginning student. I had clearly lots of experience playing it, but with plenty to learn. And that was the nice part about Oranmore at that time. It was such a teaching band and getting together a bunch of young folks and teaching us how to play better together.
Yeah, I think really any band, especially in North America, if it's going to be successful, it's going to be a teaching band. And people need to be, people need to be in the band with that expectation. Yeah.
Well, it also helps keep the experienced players engaged and not just kind of like bored. If you can harness them, it seems to work better.
So you spent in the early days, Carl, you would have spent most of your time doing the e-commerce stuff. That's not so much a part of the model anymore. Do you spend most of your time teaching now, or what do you feel like
not
is
part
the
of the
lion's
model
share?
at all now?
Yeah.
So So nowadays, I'm doing a lot of the logistics of keeping the learning platform going, all of the elements that are involved with that, keeping tabs on the e-commerce stuff, on our instructors, Tunes of the Weeks going each year, those kind of fun projects. Still very much the logistics of the company, which, I mean, we took our titles, like Andrew's he's written Master and Commander today, but he's the CEO and I'm technically the COO. So Chief Organizing Officer, which is basically what I do, or operating, whatever. It's the same thing.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that even the person with the title is like, it means one thing or the other. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah.
I do things and make things happen.
Is this stuff that you were studying in school for too, Carl, or is this just become like, yeah, not at all? Huh?
I studied history and philosophy, like relevant, but not.
Yeah, I don't want to like lock anybody studying history and philosophy into a tired joke about employability. It's such a tired joke. But were you pretty excited when you got a call from Andrew saying, hey, you're about to graduate. Do you want a job?
Totally. He definitely was. He was like, well, obviously this degree is going to amount to nothing. So
I mean, I never planned it to work in history or philosophy. It just wasn't.
Yeah.
I just loved studying it. I enjoyed that. So I was looking outside of that anyway. But yeah, it's not employable.
I'm happy for you,
neither is
Carl.
music. Neither is fine arts. So.
Well, how early on though, Andrew, do you remember how early on you thought to yourself, okay, I need somebody that'll fit into this business plan. Carl's the right fit. Was that a long time before that you were already thinking to yourself, like, we could get him helping us out with stuff? Or was it kind of spur of the moment? Oh, he might fit. And now look at us, 14 years later, it's still fitting.
At one point I kind of caught the bug and I was like, I think this has potential. I want to take this thing legit. And so you sit down and you start to plan out what that might look like. And for me, it was like, well, it's going to require at least one other extremely competent person to make this thing run legit. Well, and remember, at that time, we were talking about e-commerce and stuff. So it's like, we're talking about importing, exporting. We're talking about shipping. We're talking about FedEx and DHL and packing stuff. And we're talking about accepting deliveries. And then meanwhile, it's like, you also have to run a website and you have to take phone calls and we might have an in-person shop and all that stuff. So that's more than a one-person gig. So it started off that way, and it turns out good. We did the e-commerce all the way until COVID in one form or another, and then finally decided to cauterize that arm of the business. And there was more of an opportunity cost thing than anything else. So basically, the e-commerce, at least at the point we were at that time, it was like, it was not doing much beyond just paying Carl's salary, right? And so if we can flip that, and by the way, nothing was happening in COVID anyway. It was unclear when e-commerce would be back up and rolling again anyway. So we took that as an opportunity to focus on the educational side of things instead of the e-commerce.
Which turned out really well because COVID for us taught people to use Zoom and the things that we had already been using, and that you actually can effectively learn online, and that the software is not that hard to use. And so we got kind of busy over COVID. We had kind of an influx of folks. So it was a good moment to pivot, turns out.
Has that been, like, was that a big part of your job earlier, was convincing people that you can learn stuff on the internet?
Huge part.
Or how to use their computer? Yes.
Yeah. Well, we started this Dojo U. This was before people did that kind of thing. Most people wouldn't even know that now. But Zoom was not a thing. Zoom was still 10 years away at least. And it took us a few years before we even made it onto Adobe Connect, which is basically like the U.S. military productizing their seminar software, I think.
Adobe, but yes.
Yeah, but I think Adobe
was
the
major contract is government, basically,
Yeah. But before that, we had two bros that put together a conferencing software in their basement in their underwear. And it took us a while to find those guys. And those guys were like, hey, like, we can be your bros. And they
Where are the bros now? Where are they today?
What was that called? What was that software called?
Wasn't Claim the Web? Was that the e-commerce?
I was hoping it was just called Two Bros.
I don't think it was Claim the Web. That was
that was the e-commerce, I think.
Maybe.
Yeah, I can't remember what that was. This was when people didn't learn things online. Like, you might have a conference maybe, but that was rare. Like
Yeah.
the most you'd do is you would have a one-on-one lesson maybe with Skype, and that was challenging. But group lesson, like multiple people in a room, the technology was barely there at that
Yeah.
point. And like the internet speeds to be able to do it. So
Yeah.
amazing how far it's come.
That was the other thing too, is back in the day, I mean, we had 5 megabytes per second download at the office, but that was like a big deal. And it was way faster than most of our customers. So a lot of the stuff is just survival. We learned all sorts of different like tricks and techniques to be able to pull things off. For example, a lot of our earliest lessons are just in audio form, really, where everyone's cameras were turned off. Like now, everyone's cameras turned on is my optimal situation. I love to see all the faces in front of me, and I love to make fun of what people are doing on their cameras, and it's all a great time. But back in the day, you couldn't do that at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we had to tell people like, no, turn off your camera. We're the only ones with cameras on so that you can see us. But if you turn it on, like everything slows down. And that was the reality of it
Wow.
at that
Yeah.
point. It's crazy.
For sure. And
It's just so ubiquitous now. It's funny to remember. Oh yeah, this isn't how it's always been.
Right.
Yeah, but what's cool about that though is we really, we learned how to do it, and we were fluent in this long, 10 years before COVID. We were already basically fluent in teaching one-to-many over the internet, which is cool.
And teaching the internet to people.
Yeah. It's
Right.
like when you watch comedians who have done it for a long time. It's just hard to explain, but like they've worked through, like they were terrible for a long time. And then you can be comfortable. I don't think that's a coincidence. And you can go on a Zoom bagpipe thing that's not a dojo thing, and it can be very cringy. Just because it's like we know how to do this. Let us help, please.
Yeah.
So do you feel like most of that is just like reps? Just like after you've sat in front of a group on the internet for enough hours, you get comfortable and you get used to the little things that help it go smoothly?
Yes, absolutely. By the way, I think that it's worth shouting out to some of the dojo early adopters as well. Some of whom are still with us, some of whom work with us now. But like we did have a crew of early adopters that were there like every morning. And in the old days, I used to teach at 7:30 and Carl used to teach at 8:30, back to back. 2 hours, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 2 hours every single morning. And there were some of our early adopter diehards that went to both classes basically every single day.
Wow.
That was good too. That gave us the feedback that we needed. And I think it gave us a lot of confidence that the way we were teaching was extremely effective.
That's interesting. I remember Donald Lindsay talking about his alternative fingering system chanters, Lindsay system chanter. And he
You're
mentioned
talking about small piping Donald Lindsay.
that one. Yes, the Donald W.G. Lindsay, that Donald Lindsay. Yeah. But just something I'd never thought of before. He mentioned how he feels as the person putting the thing out, he's asking a favor of the people who are going to try to learn this system because he needs people to do it, to have it be a thing. Feedback being one of the things that you need. And so between like the Piper's Dojo, for example, and the early adopters, if you didn't have early adopters who were diehards who were there, you wouldn't have got any feedback. I mean, of course, you wouldn't have had any customers either. Like for a lot of reasons, there's a kind of symbiotic relationship going on there, isn't there?
Yes. Yeah, I feel like I was one of the very early players, not the only one. Yori comes to mind as someone who like was a huge trendsetter in the very early days. But I wasn't too far after that in just like trying to get bagpipe educational ideas out there en masse on the internet. And even before we started the dojo and before Carl came on, I was already doing that. I remember we did a few webinars. And now you might be thinking, Andrew, webinars, who cares? Back then, webinar was a brand new word.
Exciting.
Yeah, like no one had heard that word before. And so it was like, hey guys, I'm going to do a webinar and I'm going to talk about bagpipe maintenance. The interest, like people would be like, webinar, what the hell does that even mean? Okay, so that's when we were doing those. And I feel like it was maybe audio only. I feel like maybe I didn't even have a camera on me, but maybe I did.
Wow. So it was like live podcasting.
Yeah, but we had like 30 or 40 people sign on to that, let's say, way back. This would have been like in 2009 or something like that. And man, the tip of the software we used to, the tip of the name of that software is on my tongue. It's really bothering me. But anyway,
The
like we heard
name
about
of the
name.
software is on the tip of the tongue. I
your
got you. I think we all know what you're saying.
Yeah. But anyway, I remember it was like GoToMeeting. It was GoToMeeting that we did the very first webinars on. But that's not the name of the software that's not the name of the Two Bros.
No, you're right. It was something else.
This was before the Two Bros. But the problem with GoToMeeting was, I don't know, they didn't have a bunch of well, they didn't have webcams, I don't think.
Right.
I
think it
feel
was
like the
just
first
audio.
one was just audio. I don't know. But anyway, I remember getting 20, 30 people out to that. And then it was like, holy crap, you could teach 20 people at a time on the internet. I remember starting to have these epiphanies. Now Carl and I teach to more than that every single morning,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like routine. And then I just did a bagpipe tuning webinar where 1,000 people signed up and over 600 people. And is
Were
it
going
over? No,
live.
just under. Was it over? It was just under. I think it was 580 something. So we had 580 something people actually sitting in the Zoom room learning bagpipes
Wow.
with one guy running the show, which was really cool, really fun. So
I love to imagine, Andrew, that after that first webinar you did, you had 20 people sign up. You getting these ideas and being like, what if, oh my goodness, what if I could get like 25 people to sign
Right.
yeah.
up?
Yeah. Well, the gears start turning. It's what
Yeah.
if I could get 25 people to pay me money to teach, and all I
Hey,
had to do
sky's
is
the
teach
limit.
one time.
30. Make it 30 people.
This is all very common now. Computers and the internet have really brought about those economies of scale is a stupid thing to say, but it's really brought about those
Yeah.
like interesting ways of scaling things and scaling ideas. And we've been right there on the cutting edge of that. Dojo U, we started doing this and we found the two guys in their underwear and they would allow us to do video, right? They would allow us to do video and we could go back and forth and we could do GoToMeeting stuff, but it actually had video on it. Imagine that. Now there's 10,000 softwares, including the one we're on right now, where it's
Yeah.
no big deal at all. It's just common. But like, okay, these guys are going to let us do video, which is great. So what we did is like, okay, I want to call this Dojo University. And what we did originally is we set up semesters. So this is like, okay, well, how are we going to monetize this, for lack of a better word? And so what we did is we set up semesters, which were like 10-week chunks. And I called up different people that I knew. Donald Lindsay would obviously have been one of the first people I called. But then I remember we met Rab Matheson in this way. I think I just randomly sent him an email. I didn't know him at all at that point, but I was like, hey, we're doing this thing. And as it turns out, he thought that was a really cool idea. So he came on for one of the early semesters. Jack Lee came on. I feel like Callum Beaumont and Glenn Brown, they came on fairly early. I remember one we did with Mark Saul, but these were semesters. So then we would reach out to people, and this is where Claim the Web comes in, Carl. There are these people called Claim the Web that were going to allow us to take credit card payments. Woohoo. And like you had to pay way more to take credit card information over the phone. But anyway, people would call us on the telephone. Do you remember those? They would call us on the telephone and we would process their payment.
Wow.
And then they would have access to, you could do it online as well. But back in the day, like people putting their credit card information online was way less obvious. That's what you should
I
be
remember that being like, yeah, you don't put your credit card number on the internet. Don't do
doing. Yeah,
that.
Call
careful.
them.
Yeah,
Give
just
them the
call
number
them.
of
And
the
so, yeah, we would take a lot. I think I'm picturing in my mind paper order forms that we were filling out while we were on the phone, all that fun stuff. But yeah, it's funny. We would start that way. And then, but then people would
semesters, I
call in. And I don't remember do you remember what the price was, Carl, for the 10 weeks? Was it like $200?
Yeah, maybe 250 or 299 perhaps. But
That seems like way too much. I feel like it
could have been
would
as
have
low
been
as like
less.
150. I don't remember.
It would be fun to look back I'm sure somewhere in the Gmail we could find it. But it might not have been that much. I feel like it might have just been like something crazy, like $125. But then some people would sign up for multiple sessions. So they would sign up for Jack Lee and Bruce Gandy.
Mm.
Or did they get access to all of it?
I
I don't
think they
remember.
got access to all of it, but I can't remember either.
I can't remember.
It's so
But anyway,
long.
we started off with semesters, and I remember that. And it was mildly successful. It was kind of cool. Like it was a way so that we were selling bagpipe supplies and teaching some lessons. But then this was a cool way to make a little bit more money. But it was not a lot, right? But at that time, not a lot was kind of a lot. Like,
it kept the roof over our heads and the lights on, and
yeah. Yeah. And it was very small. It's actually funny to think back to it. because it seemed like such a stretch at the time. And now that would be
It's
like,
like 30 people signed up for one
I
of the
know.
semesters or something. Wow,
yeah.
a lot of people.
Yes. And then I remember we were planning for, I remember one day we were sitting down, getting ready, like thinking about maybe coming to the end of one of the semesters, thinking about the next one. And I remember going on the internet and I found this piece of software that would allow our WordPress website to connect to our CRM, to our database, right? Now, these are all, these like CRM, I had no idea what that meant, really, other than to say, well, we have one. And then this would bridge the two. So you could show different things on your website depending on what sort of tags and what sort of details about the customer in your CRM that you had. And then I remember having this thing cross my mind. It's like, wait a minute, what they're talking about is that you could get someone to just automatically pay you every month, which would get you access to different regions of a website. And like, I remember having this idea on my own. Right. And of course, it was not original idea, but to me, it was like, I remember it clicked and it was like, wait, so why don't we just have people pay us monthly? And then we'll set up, like, we'll curate a whole bunch of stuff and on an ongoing basis, not semesters, like we'll just do it forever. And then people can pay us money, a little bit of money every month. Right. And then this software would let us do that. And sure enough, that's exactly what we did. And we had a media membership site, like, way before anyone else did. And I don't mean to say that no one else had that, but at that time, it was extremely weird to have a subscription business.
I want to imagine that Andrew Douglas is sitting at the bar one night talking with a random stranger about this wild idea he has. And that random stranger's like, yeah, well, whatever, man. Walks out. Next morning, that random stranger starts Netflix or something like
Yeah.
that. Andrew invented the subscription model.
We had an online subscription media product way before Netflix.
Yeah.
Netflix was still doing the DVD thing.
It'll-
I remember someone was like, have you heard of this thing called Masterclass? Someone asked me that and I was like, bro, I mean, we've been doing that,
I
granted,
invented it.
in
Yeah.
a very small, we've been doing that in a small bagpipe form for 5 years before Masterclass even started with their
Yeah.
first thing. It was very weird, but the bagpiping is funny that way in the sense that the world is very spread out and it's hard to find experts. And so you used to mail cassette tapes back and forth with Donald McLeod and stuff in
Yes.
order to get great instruction. And then the piping school scene sort of evolved in North America, which was a huge leap forward. But then hats off to people like Yori who were like, man, selling bagpipe information on the internet, is it going to be a huge thing? And it definitely was. Skype lessons were huge, huge, huge. But before Skype lessons, a lot of people will remember we used to do phone lessons because that's the only feasible way to get the bagpipe knowledge. Anyway, the internet is great. We were extremely early to the idea that you could have a subscription online school model. But the reason it worked is because bagpipers, at least a small core group of bagpipers, there's enough of them that realized right away how valuable that would be. And that's how Dojo U really started. And for a while, we had the two guys in their underwear still. And then we switched to a software called Adobe Connect.
I thought you said two guys wearing pants.
Yeah. Well, and presumably the people
Just
that worked
moving up.
I'm pretty
They
sure
probably had pants, yes.
I'm significantly more confident in the Adobe people that they wore pants. And then, by the way, the two underwear guys, they did great. When we got the Adobe demo, it was just obviously way better. So we went with
They
that.
had more resources, time, and it was like, I was
And
the
then our
same when we
switch to
switched
Zoom
from
was
Adobe
pretty
to
similar.
Zoom. It was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, this is so clearly the way to go.
Yeah, we switched to Zoom, but we had to keep Adobe Connect for a while after because they, like a lot of our recordings and stuff were stored on their cloud.
8 years or something worth
Yeah.
of recordings were stored on their cloud at the time.
Yep, exactly. So anyway, we've just sort of been moving with the times and kind of riding that wave. And that's Dojo U in a nutshell.
Well, so now you're 14 years deep. And Carl, I'm curious, have you, I don't want to say have you regretted it, but I mean, have you, or rather, maybe a better question is how often have you wondered how long this thing would last? Or has it just been like smooth sailing from the beginning?
I think my only doubts were like at the beginning, the first year or two, it's like, how long is this actually going to work? Is this
Yeah.
going to work? But after that, it's just been so clearly functional and working Yeah, that I don't know, we're too caught up in making it better every day that's something that really worries me. Like we're going to work hard. We're going to continue to put out the best product we can. I think we'll keep adapting to whatever we need to.
No,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
I mean, Carl, tell me if you disagree, but I think a big early aha moment for Carl might have been shortly after an aha moment for me. I read this wild and crazy book by this crazy idiot called The 4-Hour Workweek.
Right.
And like a lot of the stuff in that book is absolute crazy talk. But I remember it kind of inspired me and I was like, Carl, you got to read this. And he actually did read it. I remember we made a few decisions about the business early on that were really smart. Like one of the decisions that we did is we basically cut the phone lines. Not really. We didn't actually cut the phone lines. But like if you didn't get us in the office, leave a message and then we would deal with the rest via email and stuff. And then we started doing other things like we certainly never had any servers. Everything was way before people even used the cloud. We were doing all of our stuff on the cloud, making sure that like we never did anything that required us to be like tethered to a physical location.
Yeah. What little tethers we had, we started to chip away at and be like, how can we do this? We're playing in bands. We're going to Scotland every year, like for 2 weeks. How do you do that with a business and that's tied to the ground? You either have to shutter it or you got to be able to do other stuff. And it's like, well, there's still things going on. So I got to be able to check my email. Email was an easy example, but there were others. Like, how do I get a phone message when I'm in Scotland? It's on my answering machine on the office. That doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, and then email, it seems obvious, but it wasn't. Like you'll remember, I mean, there's still people who, if they're not at their desktop computer, don't know how to get into their Outlook. I feel like there's still a few that where you're like, wait, what? But we did, we had Gmail like back before that was obvious. But what was great about Gmail is you could check it from anywhere. Obviously, okay, we're going to do that. And we were pretty aggressive about making painful changes as soon as we still do that, Carl, right? I mean, we make painful changes the exact moment it becomes clear that that's what needs to be done.
I'm remembering a year and a half ago when we switched our entire system.
Yeah.
And had to do hundreds of hours of work to make it go. And we decided in December and we started putting it into action in January.
Yeah. And it's just because it's just really clear that was the way that things needed to go. But we've done that many times. And then I remember, and then I kind of wonder how it all would have been, right? But I remember the Oran Moore pipe band had a big split and the band basically kind of dissolved. And Carl, you were part of Stuart Highlanders or not?
Oh, yeah. 2
Yeah.
years.
So we did Stuart
it,
Highlanders. So we were driving back and forth to Boston for 2 years. And then that kind of fell apart as well. So a lot of the stuff that we were doing that tied us to this part of the world sort of evaporated. I remember that one day you're kind of like, so I'm going to move to France. And it was like, oh, okay. Well, it became clear, certainly for Carl, like my family is in upstate New York, so I'm not going too far, but it kind of became clear for Carl that there wasn't a whole lot tying him to this.
For me at that time.
Yeah. It wasn't a whole lot tying him to this specific area. And then sure enough, he's, I'm going to move to France. And I'm like, well, how's that going to work? And he's like, well, it's basically going to work the same way, except for I'm going to be in France, which was really cool. I mean, it was really cool.
There were so few things at that point that weren't already 100% online.
Again, Carl, you invented being a digital nomad. You were the first one.
Well, he certainly was. Yeah. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah, on the cutting edge of it for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, if I wanted to, I could move to somewhere as well, especially now with Starlink, which is like the coolest thing ever. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Carl's on Starlink right now, which is so cool. Because Carl moved to France, which is great. And then at some point, several months in, he never really told me, but like it became clear Carl was no longer like at a physical location. And he's been on and Carl, I don't know, maybe you don't like to share this with everyone.
At this point, it's almost old news.
The cat's out of the bag.
Cat's out of the bag.
But for the last 5 years, you've been like living and doing your entire job on a boat.
The first 2 years of that, we bought a boat and moved on board. And I had to make sure that I was going to be able to do my job. And at that time, we were just in a harbor and we didn't move. We were in the same place every day, figuring out those logistics. And then at some point, I told Andrew after it was working for a couple of months, because I wanted to have that fallback as if it wasn't working for some reason, come up with a different plan. But it was like a no-brainer, it worked just as well. Then we pulled the plug and left the dock and started cruising like full time and not being in the same place. And that was like, okay, we got to make sure this works too. And then Starlink came along and made everything so much easier.
Yeah.
And then even this year, the same sort of progression. Starlink has gotten so good that it works flawlessly, even while we're moving, which is insane how well it works. And totally not possible even last year. Like last year, they didn't have enough satellites to keep it going. And now it's like dead simple.
Yeah, I don't know if the viewing public will be able to tell once I do the green screen work.
You can see the light sometimes moving in the background on my green screen.
I've been sitting here watching the sun come and go and just thinking to myself, like, that looks like physical motion. And thinking, like, maybe he's got, like, a reflective decoration outside the window that keeps turning.
No, that reflective decoration is the sun.
It's the sun.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So then at some point, then Carl...
Sometimes it occurs to me, like, where I think Carl is not even anywhere close to where he is. Like, you were in Greece for a while, and it was like, when the hell did you get to Greece?
I was in Greece a month and a half ago. And today
Carl's like, I don't know. I'm just always floating around.
Like Gibraltar, the closest point to Africa in Europe.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Nice.
That's pretty cool.
Next week, I'll probably be in Portugal. I'm actually wrapping up sailing time. Gonna go find a house in a stable community and in another wonderful piping
under you?
In another wonderful piping area of the world. So.
That's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, is that you can go do some? You've been exploring some Bagad stuff there in France.
Some Breton music, absolutely.
Nice.
So that's the plan here.
So, at what point does the dojo add like a whole section for Breton music? When is that coming, Carl? You gonna make an announcement for us here?
Right now. No, I got no announcement there. I am not an expert in it, but I'm looking forward to learning more and playing more Bagad.
Yeah, very cool.
I think that the Bagad music is really interesting in the sense that it's like they're doing some incredible stuff, but for whatever reason, people don't really know about it in our market anyway. A lot of people are like, Bagad, what?
Well, I do think there's might be something either like really obvious or maybe only obvious in retrospect about like if you want your business to exist online and all over the world, your business needs to exist online. You know what I mean? So
if you guys still want to have a business, that's not like in-person service.
If you were still trying to maintain that though, like you have an in-person place, that kind of thing. It's like by untethering yourselves, in how many ways did you untether the content so that people can access it without tethers everywhere else?
It definitely drove us to make some decisions that turned out to be really smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, really interesting decisions. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I think that's probably what any business needs to figure out how to do. And it's not something where it's like you can sit down and think about it and you're like, this is what we should do. But it's kind of like what you end up doing is you end up making decisions where you're trying to increase your revenue or you're trying to increase the value of your offering or something like that. And what you end up doing is you end up accidentally optimizing for what your constituents want, right? And then what a lot of bagpipers really want and really need is access to top quality information and the ability to interact with high level players from remote locations. I think that's really what the dojo does really well.
That makes sense.
Sort of. Although there's the unspoken thing about the dojo that often gets missed because we do everything online and it seems like we're just technologically advanced. But the other dirty little secret about the dojo is that the way we teach bagpipes is better than any other way of teaching bagpipes. Now, look, I don't mean that to say all the other ways are bad and blah, blah, blah. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is we teach things in a different, very specific way, and we've also developed that. And our platform allows us to do that. So instead of teaching 30 students a week, we teach 1,500 a week. And then we get the feedback, right? And we're able to change and hone and adjust the way that we teach. And we believe it's the best way. By the way, if we didn't, that'd be a problem, right? So I'm not trying to say all the other ways are bad or anything like that. I'm just saying that what we're doing is unique and really cool. And it's fascinating to see people get results in amazing ways that weren't possible before. And that's the actual content is good and unique. It's not just the fact that it's on the internet that makes it interesting. That's the secret
on
sauce.
the internet, and it works.
And it works. Yeah. So it's not just that the format is unique or well developed. The content is also good, is an important element.
It's sort of like a positive feedback loop. I mean, as you were saying, Andrew, like we needed this technology to move there, but then that influenced how we taught, and it just sort of evolved naturally from all of those different inputs. And I feel like it's the same way, like what we needed out of our company as individuals in our own lives. Well, I wanted the company to be online so I'd have the freedom to move to another country. But that also positively impacted the company in the way that we organized it. And we have lots of those examples where even what we wanted turned out to be a good direction for the business to go.
Yep, for sure. Well, and then the other thing too is like also what the customers need shapes where the direction the business goes as well.
Obviously, yeah.
And you learn a lot of those things. But yeah, I wrote the Dojo Beginner Tutor way before there was a dojo. I remember outlining it. I was sitting bored in a recital in university. I was like super bored.
Whose recital was it, Andrew?
No comment. And I was just bored, and I remember having this idea. I remember thinking, the way I think about bagpipes is not linear, right? Like, I don't think about it in a linear way. Also, ask yourself the question, why would I be thinking about that at that time? It doesn't make any sense other than to say, I've always just kind of been obsessed with bagpipes stuff and teaching bagpipes and all that. But it's not linear. That's a problem. It doesn't work that way. And we're teaching people linear, but it shouldn't be. And instead it should be layers. And then I was like, well, what would the layers be? Well, first we got to learn the basic notes, right? Then we got to put grace notes on it. And I remember thinking to myself, well, that's not really it either. I mean, there's different layers of grace notes. There's a hierarchy of importance. And obviously it would start with the G grace note. So I was like, okay, well, let's learn layer 1. Okay. Then let's put G grace notes on what we did in layer 1, right? Then we'll add some more grace notes on to what we did in the G grace note layer. And then after that, we'll start to put in embellishments. Adding layers is really what's going on. And it's not a linear thing. It's not A plus B plus C equals bagpiper. And that was really one of the seminal ideas. I remember putting that together in a more official PDF. I remember Maureen Connor and this then called the Scotia Glenville Juvenile Band. She took that system and rolled with it. And the results were awesome. Not only did the kids band win a bunch of stuff, including a world championship, and then they went and played in the juvenile grade. Not only did she do that, but then a lot of the kids in that band quickly made the jump to the Oren Moore pipe band. And it was like, oh, holy crap. That was an idea. The idea that the layers really work. Small sample size, but it seems to have potential.
You look at some of the students we've seen come from literally zero.
Yeah.
Start with us. Their quality of piping just a few years later, it's really impressive. And those might be some outliers, but then we have a ton of students that are not the outliers, and they're making huge progress.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that the dojo has the reputation currently as being for adult learners, and it's true. We do have a ton. But one of the reasons our system is so effective for adult learners is because our system
Teaches them like kids.
Well, maybe, but our system works better, right? For people who are willing to dive in and consider our thoughts, which adult learners often really are because they've struggled so much. And then it can take a while, but if we can convince an adult learner to jump in with our ideas, the magic starts to happen fast. We've had some amazing breakthroughs, even just this year. I'm thinking of some individuals where it's like, aha, they're finally getting it. And the results are really big. So it's like, yeah, you can use the dojo system to produce a grade 1 pipe core, which we did. The Oren Moore project was basically
study in that.
Yeah, it was basically an application of the dojo stuff. But then you can also use the system to go from really struggling to becoming pretty darn decent, which is not glorious, right? It's not like what most bagpipe teachers want to do when they wake up in the morning. So it doesn't seem glorious, but it is. If you imagine 100 as being like Stuart Little, right? If I can get you from stuck at 5 to 45 in a year, that's pretty glorious.
That is pretty exciting, yeah.
And we do that often. It's pretty cool. It's really cool. It's not what we thought we were going to do when we started. But it's ended up being really useful for them.
Yeah, it is interesting that what was this minor little detail, like I could imagine even like approaching early investors, for example, and being like, oh, it's an e-commerce business and we're going to do some education on the side. I could imagine if I was the investor at that time being like, that's just going to be a drain on resources. Why even have that little side project?
Well, interestingly, most of our investors very wisely said, there doesn't really seem to be that much potential in the e-commerce. Why are you doing that? Why don't you focus?
Oh, interesting.
Why don't you focus on the
maybe that's
education?
why I'm not an investor.
Yeah. Yeah, Jim, you might want to have a professional check over your portfolio there. But,
right. Where is that portfolio?
Yeah, where is that? But yeah, I remember, so a lot of investors said that. I remember one who was not a piper that said, this business plan it'll be fine, but I don't see it going anywhere because there's no real way to create new customers. Right? Like, where are you going to get new customers from? And by the way, that's still a problem, but the combination of various like thoughts and advice from people who invested, like you should ditch the e-commerce, which we've now done. Ditch the
e-commerce. Us a while, but yeah.
Focus on the education. And then one of the things that we can do now, we'd love to do it better, but one of the things we do is we can create pipers from scratch on our system. And there really is a way for you to go from absolute zero to absolute hero, at least conceptually, on the dojo. So now there are new customers that exist that are dojo all the way, which is pretty cool.
So I mean, this sounds heartless, right? But like in a narrow way, talking about like business stuff, right? You are like manufacturing customers, like you are generating new customers.
Well, yes,
because you don't have to just rely on the existing population of bagpipers. You can create new bagpipers.
We'd love to do that more, Jim, for sure. But that's the idea, yeah. And it's not heartless. That's the name of the game. I'm pretty sure that everybody would agree more bagpipers is a good thing.
That's for sure. Yeah.
We love this music, so if we can share this, great. And it's certainly improved our lives. Everything about Andrew and I, it's been centered around piping for our entire lives. It's brought such richness and possibilities to our lives. It's just
definitely
I can't imagine any other way.
Yeah, I mean,
so I want to share that.
Yeah, for sure.
That's
for
beautiful.
Sure, that's right. You know, there you go. I mean, that seems like a good place to stop.
Yeah, I was going to ask you another question, but honestly.
Hey everybody, Andrew Douglas here from the Pipers Dojo, and I just want to say thanks so much for listening to today's iteration of the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard here today, it would be super helpful to us and to a lot of bagpipers out there trying to find us. If you could give us a top-notch review on whatever platform you're using to listen to this podcast, particularly Apple, iTunes, and Spotify and things like that, your review would be really, really helpful. So if you have a moment today, definitely go over there and help us out. Other than that, until we meet again on the podcast or somewhere else, thanks again for listening.